How does it all work? How do literally millions, even billions of individuals, each with their own unique goals and desires, come together to form this huge, complicated thing we call society? This is one of the oldest and, honestly, most fascinating puzzles in all of human thought, and today we are going to unpack the major answers.
Right. This is the big one. This is the fundamental question. Does everything tick along because of some kind of natural harmony? Is there a secret code buried deep in our minds that makes us all follow the same rules? Or is it all just one big, constant struggle for power? People have been debating this for centuries, and it's led to some incredibly powerful ideas about who we really are.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with that initial search for the social glue that holds us together. Then, we'll dive into three massive answers. First, functionalism, which sees society as a living body. Then, structuralism, with its idea of a hidden code. And finally, we'll get into conflict theory, which argues that, well, maybe society isn't built on harmony at all, but on struggle. Let's get started.
Okay, first things first. Let's tackle the foundational problem that kicked this whole thing off: social integration. You see, early thinkers were absolutely obsessed with this one simple question. In a world full of individuals, what's the social glue that keeps us all from just spinning off into chaos? What holds us together? So when we say social integration, what are we really talking about? Well, think of it as the process of connecting all the different parts of society, people, groups, institutions, so they form a stable whole. It's basically the wiring that makes the entire social machine run without falling apart. And you can actually see this idea evolving over time. It really starts with Hobbes worrying about chaos and proposing a social contract to keep us in line. Then you get thinkers like Comte and Spencer, who introduce this really powerful metaphor: society as a living organism, a body. This gets sharpened by the great Emile Durkheim, who zeroes in on this idea of social solidarity. And that concept, society as a body, is the direct launchpad for our first major theory.
And that brings us right to functionalism. If you've ever thought of society as a kind of harmonious system where every single part has a purpose, then you're already thinking like a functionalist. It's the theory that sees society not just as a bunch of people, but as a single, living, breathing thing. This is the core analogy, and it's actually super helpful. Think about it. The family, the economy, our government, they're all like the heart, the lungs, and the brain. Each one performs a vital function, not just for itself, but to keep the entire social body healthy, stable, and in balance, in equilibrium.
But, and this is a really key point, especially if you're studying this, there was a big debate inside functionalism. Does society serve itself, or does it serve us? Radcliffe Brown argued that institutions exist to maintain the social structure itself. The whole is what matters. But Malinowski, he said, no. He believed it all starts with the individual. For him, institutions are just tools we invent to meet our basic human needs, and a stable society is just a happy side effect.
And Malinowski broke these needs down into three levels, which is a great way to remember it. First, you've got our basic biological needs: food, water, safety. Simple enough. Then, to get those things, we create instrumental systems, like our economy, our laws, our education. But we're more than just animals, right? We also have integrative needs for meaning and purpose, and that's where religion, art, and magic come in. So for Malinowski, culture is basically this giant, amazing toolkit for satisfying our deepest human needs.
Okay, but what if the order we see isn't out there in our institutions, but actually inside our heads? This lets us pivot to our next big theory, structuralism. This whole perspective argues that underneath all the wild diversity of human cultures, there's a universal blueprint, a kind of hidden code that's hardwired into the human mind itself.
So the key metaphor here totally shifts. We're not talking about an organism anymore, we're talking about a language. Think about it. You don't need to consciously diagram a sentence to speak correctly, right? You just know the grammar. Well, structuralists believe we follow an unconscious cultural grammar in pretty much everything we do. The real goal is to figure out what those hidden rules are.
Now, to really get this, we've got to look at where it came from: linguistics, and a guy named Saussure. He made this super important distinction. He said there's lang, which is the entire system, all the rules of the game, the complete structure of a language. And then there's parole, which is the individual act of speaking, the specific things we actually say. For a structuralist, the culture we can see and touch is just parola. The real prize is figuring out the lang that's generating it all behind the scenes.
So what is this universal grammar? The giant of structuralism, Claude Lévi-Strauss, had an answer: binary opposition. He argued that the human mind is basically wired to understand the world in pairs of opposites, hot/cold, nature/culture, us/them. It sounds simple, but he believed the single principle is the hidden engine that structures absolutely everything, from our deepest myths to how we organize our families.
All right, so far we've looked at theories all about order, harmony, and hidden codes. But what if that's all just a nice story? This brings us to a really radical counter-argument, conflict theory. This theory doesn't just disagree, it flips the whole script and says society isn't defined by cooperation, but by a constant, relentless struggle for power and resources.
And this is the question that conflict theorists force us to ask. Forget about a healthy organism or a shared mental grammar. Just look around you. Do you see everyone happily agreeing? Or do you see tension? Do you see people working together? Or do you see groups competing for the upper hand? This slide lays out the divide perfectly. Functionalism looks at society and asks, how does it all work together? But conflict theory asks a much sharper, more uncomfortable question. Who benefits? It argues that social order isn't based on some happy consensus, but on the power of one group to basically force its will onto others. The questions they ask tell you everything about their worldview.
And of course, the most influential, the most powerful version of this idea is Marxism. For Karl Marx, the one single conflict that overshadowed everything else was the struggle between economic classes.
Marx saw all of human history as this grand progression through different stages of class conflict. It starts simple, with hunter-gatherer equality. But then society divides, masters and slaves, then lords and serfs, and finally, in his time, under capitalism, it becomes the bourgeoisie, the owners of everything, and the proletariat, the workers who have nothing but their labor. For Marx, this struggle isn't some problem with the system. It is the system. It's the very engine of history, pushing us toward an inevitable revolution.
And this one quote from the Communist Manifesto really says it all. It captures the entire worldview. Forget about kings and queens and great battles. For Marx, the real story of humanity, the hidden engine behind all of it, is this relentless, ongoing struggle between economic classes.
So, let's just do a quick recap of the whole journey. These are the key takeaways. We started with the basic puzzle of social integration. Functionalism gave us the organism answer, all about harmony and needs. Structuralism gave us the hidden code answer, saying the real action is in our minds. And finally, conflict theory gave us the struggle answer, seeing society as a battleground for power.
So, we end up here with three incredibly powerful but totally competing ways to look at the world. Is society fundamentally about order? Is it about a hidden code in the mind? Or is it about perpetual conflict? There isn't a single right answer. The real question, the one you have to ask yourself, is when you look at the world around you, which of these lenses helps you make the most sense of it all?